The soft glow of streetlights filtered through the cafe windows as Min worked quickly to set up the small stage. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her phone one more time. No missed calls from the babysitter. Her 8-year-old son David was having another rough day, but she couldn't miss tonight's performance. Every dollar counted. The cafe's regular customers were starting to trickle in, ordering their evening coffees and pastries. Min knew most of them by name now. There was sweet Mrs. Rodriguez, who always left an extra tip for the boy, and Mr. Kim from the bookstore next door, who would time his dinner break with her first song. 10 minutes, Min, called out Joe, the cafe owner, as he wiped down the counter. He had given her this singing gig 6 months ago, when he overheard her humming while applying for a waitressing position. That simple act of kindness had become a lifeline for her family. Min's thoughts drifted to David as she adjusted the microphone stand. Just last week, during another hospital visit, the doctors had used words like experimental treatment and specialized care. The numbers they mentioned afterward made her head spin. Even with her morning shift at the diner, afternoon tutoring sessions, and these evening performances, it seemed impossible. But David's smile this morning, weak as it was, flashed in her mind. Despite his rare heart condition, he never complained. "Mom, when I get better, can we go to the park again?" he had asked, clutching his beloved soccer ball. That ball hadn't been kicked in months, but David refused to let go of his dream to play again. The cafe lights dimmed and Min closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. The familiar scent of coffee and warmth wrapped around her like a comfort blanket. As she did every night, she would start with "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." It wasn't just a song anymore. It had become her prayer, her hope, her way of reaching out to anyone who might be listening. Her voice, though untrained, carried something special that made people stop their conversations and listen. Maybe it was the way she infused every word with her love for David, or perhaps it was the quiet desperation that made her voice crack ever so slightly during certain phrases. Whatever it was, it made the tiny cafe feel like a cathedral of hopes and dreams. Tonight seemed different somehow. The usual Tuesday crowd was smaller, scattered across the cafe like autumn leaves. A few tourists had wandered in, seeking shelter from the unexpectedly cool Los Angeles evening. Min noticed an empty table in the back corner, partially hidden in shadows. Something about it caught her attention, but she couldn't quite say why. As she began to sing, Min did what she always did. She transformed her worry into melody, her fear into harmony. Each note carried a story of late-night hospital visits, of holding David's hand through countless tests, of watching other kids play in the park while her son pressed his face against the window. But it also carried her unwavering hope, her determination to see David run again, to hear his laughter echo across a soccer field. The first song ended and gentle applause rippled through the cafe. Min opened her eyes, offering a small smile to her audience. That's when she noticed movement at the back table. Someone had slipped in unnoticed. The figure sat quietly, face hidden beneath a baseball cap, seemingly lost in thought. Little did Min know that this ordinary Tuesday evening was about to become extraordinary, and her simple cafe performance would set in motion events that would change everything. But for now, she simply moved on to her next song, her voice carrying dreams of healing and hope into the Los Angeles night. The mysterious figure in the back remained still as Min moved through her usual setlist. Between songs, she checked her phone again, still no messages from the babysitter. She pushed down her worry and focused on the next song, her fingers gripping the microphone stand a little tighter. The cafe had grown quieter as the evening wore on. The clink of coffee cups and gentle murmur of conversations created a soft backdrop to her music. Mr. Kim had left after his usual 2 songs, leaving a generous tip and a gentle pat on her shoulder. Mrs. Rodriguez was dozing in her favorite corner spot, her half-finished tea getting cold. As Min began Bridge Over Troubled Water, the cafe's bell chimed. A small commotion stirred outside. Camera flashes briefly illuminated the windows. Joe quickly moved to lower the blinds, protecting his customers' privacy as he always did. The figure in the back shifted slightly, pulling his cap lower. Min's voice never wavered, though she noticed a few people outside pressing their faces against the cafe's windows. Years of singing through worry and exhaustion had taught her to stay focused, to pour her heart into each note regardless of distractions. Tonight, she sang as she always did, for David, for hope for tomorrow. During a short break, While sipping warm water with honey, Min overheard snippets of excited whispers. Is it really him? The Matrix guy? John Wick? She glanced at the back table, understanding slowly dawning. The dim lighting and baseball cap couldn't completely hide what she now realized. Keanu Reeves was sitting in Joe's cafe. But Min had learned long ago that stars were just people seeking moments of peace. Los Angeles had taught her that much. So she stepped back onto the small stage, treating him like any other customer seeking solace in music and warm coffee on a quiet Tuesday night. Her next song was different. A Chinese lullaby her mother used to sing, the one she now sang to David on his difficult nights. She rarely performed it at the cafe, but something about tonight felt right. The melody carried memories of hospital rooms transformed by soft singing, of pain eased by gentle words in her mother tongue. The song ended, leaving a profound silence in its wake. Min opened her eyes to find Keanu Reeves looking directly at her, his expression thoughtful. He had removed his cap, perhaps moved by the authenticity of the moment, no longer concerned about being recognized. As she began her final song of the night, more people gathered outside the cafe. Joe stood guard at the door, protecting the peaceful atmosphere inside. The contrast was striking. The growing excitement outside versus the gentle intimacy within, where a mother simply sang for her son's future. Min's voice carried years of hope and fear in every note. Each word held the weight of medical bills piling up on her kitchen table, of David's brave smiles through painful treatments, of countless nights spent researching experimental procedures while her son slept. When the last note faded, there was a moment of perfect stillness. Then Keanu stood up, walked to the tip jar and dropped something in. But instead of leaving, he lingered, his eyes fixed on Min with an intensity that suggested he had heard more than just music in her performance. Joe was already starting to stack chairs, his usual signal that closing time approached. Regular customers gathered their belongings, leaving with their usual warm goodbyes. But as Min began packing up her small speaker, she realized Keanu was waiting nearby, seemingly wanting to talk. The night was about to take an unexpected turn, one that would change everything. But for now, Min simply focused on collecting her tips, thinking of David waiting at home, unaware that his mother's voice had reached someone who could help make his dreams of playing soccer come true. Min's hands trembled slightly as she counted the evening's tips. Every dollar meant something: medicine, food, or another payment toward David's mounting medical bills. The cafe was almost empty now, chairs turned up on tables, the coffee machines quietly humming their end-of-day cleaning cycles. That last song, a gentle voice spoke behind her. The lullaby. What language was it? Min turned to find Keanu Reeves standing nearby, his cap now held loosely in his hands. Up close, she could see the kindness in his eyes, so different from his intense movie characters. It's Chinese, she replied, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. My mother taught it to me when I was little. Now I sing it to my son. Her voice caught slightly at the mention of David. There was something special in the way you sang it, Keanu said, pulling up one of the few chairs still on the floor. Like every word carried a story. Joe busied himself in the kitchen, pretending not to listen while giving them space to talk. Outside, the small crowd had finally dispersed, leaving only the quiet Los Angeles night pressing against the windows. Min found herself telling this stranger about David, about his rare heart condition, about how he still kept his soccer ball by his bed even though he couldn't play anymore. She spoke about the experimental treatment the doctors had mentioned, hope mixing with fear in her voice. The specialists say it could help him, she explained, her fingers unconsciously twisting her worn silver ring, a habit from anxious hospital visits. But the cost? She trailed off, the numbers still too overwhelming to voice. Keanu listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about David's condition. When Min mentioned her 3 jobs, his expression shifted, remembering perhaps his own sister's battle with leukemia years ago. You know, he said carefully, I've worked with several children's hospitals here in LA. Through the years, I've met some incredible doctors who, he paused, choosing his words with care. Sometimes the right connections can make impossible things possible. Min's heart skipped a beat, but experience had taught her to be cautious with hope. That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly. Please, Keanu interrupted gently. Let me make a few calls. No promises, but there are people who might be able to help. People who understand what it's like to watch someone you love fight through illness. Joe appeared with 3 cups of fresh tea, setting them down quietly before retreating again. The warmth of the cup in Min's hands helped steady her emotions as Keanu shared stories about the children's hospitals he'd visited, the families he'd met, the miracles he'd witnessed. Min's phone buzzed. A text from the babysitter saying David had finally fallen asleep. She showed Keanu a photo of her son, his brave smile shining despite the hospital machinery around him. "He never complains," she said softly, "even on the hardest days." "Kids are stronger than we think," Keanu replied, his voice carrying the weight of personal understanding. He pulled out his phone, checking the time. "Listen, I know someone at Cedars, a pediatric specialist. Would it be okay if I made a call tonight?" The cafe's lights flickered, Joe's supple signal that it was well past closing time. Min gathered her courage and nodded, hope blooming cautiously in her chest. Sometimes angels wore baseball caps and arrived on ordinary Tuesday nights. Before leaving, Keanu wrote down his personal assistant's number. "Call tomorrow morning," he said. "We'll set up a meeting with the specialist. And Min?" He paused at the door. "Keep singing that lullaby. Some songs have the power to change lives." As Min walked to her car that night, the stars seemed to shine a little brighter over Los Angeles. Tomorrow would bring new possibilities, new hopes. But for now, she hurried home to where David slept, eager to kiss his forehead and whisper promises of better days to come. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Min stared at the phone number in her hand. David sat at the table, pushing cereal around his bowl, his soccer ball faithfully propped against his chair. The babysitter's words from last night still echoed in her mind. He'd had another breathing episode before falling asleep. "Mom, are you okay?" David asked, his dark eyes watching her with that old soul wisdom that sometimes broke her heart. "Yes, sweetie," she smiled, running her fingers through his messy hair. "Just thinking about making an important call." Her fingers shook as she dialed the number Keanu had given her. Part of her worried it might not be real, that last night had been a dream born from desperation and hope. But a warm, professional voice answered on the second ring. "Good morning, this is Lisa, Mr. Reeves' assistant. You must be Min?" The next hour passed in a blur. Lisa efficiently arranged everything, an appointment with Dr. Chen, one of Los Angeles' top pediatric cardiac specialists, for that very afternoon. When Min mentioned her work shifts, Lisa gently cut her off. "Mr. Reeves has taken care of everything. Your only job today is to be there for David." At the diner where Min worked morning shifts, her manager, Mr. Patel, didn't even let her apologize for the short notice. "Family comes first," he said firmly, pressing a paper bag with fresh samosas into her hands. For strength. The hospital was different from their usual one, bigger, more modern. In the gleaming lobby, a kind-faced woman named Mrs. Wu was waiting to guide them through the maze of corridors. David gripped Min's hand tightly, his other arm hugging his soccer ball against his chest like a shield. "Mr. Reeves told me about David's love for soccer." Mrs. Wu smiled, leading them to a bright consultation room. The walls were covered with sports posters, including one of a famous soccer player who'd recovered from a heart condition. David's eyes lit up at the sight. Dr. Chen arrived carrying a thick folder, David's medical records, somehow already transferred and reviewed. But what surprised Min most was seeing Keanu slip quietly into the room behind him, dressed simply in jeans and a black sweater. "I hope you don't mind," he said softly, staying near the door. "I wanted to make sure everything went smoothly." What followed was unlike any medical consultation Min had experienced. Dr. Chen explained everything clearly, using simple drawings to help David understand. He talked about a new surgical procedure, one that could help David's heart work better, stronger. The technique was developed in Japan, Dr. Chen explained, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We've had remarkable success rates, especially with young patients like David." When Min started to ask about insurance and costs, Keanu stepped forward. "That's all been arranged," he said quietly, "through the hospital's charitable foundation." "But," Min began, tears threatening to spill. "Sometimes," Keanu said, kneeling down to David's eye level, "the world needs certain songs to be sung. Your mom's voice helped me remember something important, that we're all connected, all responsible for each other. This isn't charity, Min, it's humanity." David, who had been quiet throughout the meeting, suddenly spoke up. Will I really be able to play soccer again? Dr. Chen smiled warmly. With time and proper rehabilitation, yes. In fact, I know a physical therapist who works with the LA Galaxy youth team. She specializes in helping kids return to sports after heart procedures. As they discussed surgery dates and preparation details, Min noticed Keanu quietly slipping out of the room. But before he left, he placed something on the chair, a signed soccer ball with a message. To David, every great player needs the right team behind them. You've got yours now. Keep dreaming big. Later that evening, as Min tucked David into bed, he hugged his new soccer ball close. Mom, he whispered, is this real? Are we really going to be okay? Min kissed his forehead, tears of gratitude and hope finally falling freely. Yes, my brave boy. Sometimes angels wear baseball caps and listen to lullabies. Now want to hear your special song? As she sang the familiar Chinese melody, Min's voice carried something new alongside its usual love and hope, certainty. Outside his window, the Los Angeles stars twinkled like promises, while somewhere in the city, a quiet hero smiled, knowing that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could change entire worlds. The week before surgery flew by in a whirlwind of tests and preparations. Dr. Chen's office became a second home, its walls now familiar and somehow comforting. David approached each new test with quiet bravery, clutching his signed soccer ball during blood draws and scans. Min watched in amazement as the medical team worked together like a well-rehearsed orchestra. Dr. Chen conducted additional tests that previous doctors hadn't considered, using advanced imaging equipment that showed David's heart from angles they'd never seen before. Look here, Dr. Chen said during one consultation, pointing to a 3D model of David's heart rotating on his computer screen. Previous scans missed this small structural anomaly because they weren't looking from this particular angle. The Japanese procedure is perfect for this specific situation. The technical language was overwhelming, but Dr. Chen had a gift for explaining complex medical terms in simple ways. He used paper origami to demonstrate how they would repair David's heart, folding and unfolding the paper to show the precise movements. David leaned forward, fascinated, his eyes wide with understanding rather than fear. You see, Dr. Chen explained, holding up the finished paper heart, sometimes the simplest solutions are hidden in plain sight. We just need to look at things differently. During one of their visits, they met Dr. Tanaka, who had flown in from Tokyo to assist with the surgery. He shared stories about other children who had undergone the same procedure, showing pictures of kids playing sports and living normal lives. David's eyes sparkled with each story, hope blooming like spring flowers. Your heart, Dr. Tanaka told David, is like a beautiful instrument that just needs a little tuning. Soon it will play perfectly again. Min continued her evening performances at the cafe, but now her songs carried a different emotion. Regular customers noticed the change in her voice, the way hope had replaced desperation, how her smile reached her eyes again. Joe kept the tip jar prominently displayed, adding a small sign that read, "For a brave little soccer player." One evening, a package arrived at their apartment. Inside was a complete LA Galaxy youth soccer uniform, sized perfectly for David, with a note, "For after your comeback." Kia, David insisted on trying on the jersey, standing proudly in front of the mirror despite his tiredness. The night before the final pre-surgery appointment, Min found David sitting on his bed, having a serious conversation with his soccer ball. "I'm a little scared," he whispered to it, "but Mom says brave people can be scared too. They just don't let it stop them." Min's heart squeezed hearing those words, her own words reflected back through her son's courage. She sat beside him, pulling him close. "Want to know a secret?" she said softly. "Every great adventure has a little bit of scary in it. That's what makes it special." At their final consultation, Dr. Chen showed them one last scan. "Everything looks perfect for tomorrow," he smiled. "The procedure has an excellent success rate, especially now that we understand exactly what we're dealing with. David's heart is strong. It just needs a little help to be its best self." As they left the hospital that evening, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of hope. David pointed to a cloud that looked like a soccer ball. "Mom," he said thoughtfully, "when I grow up, I want to be like Mr. Reeves, not an actor, but someone who helps people find the right doctors when they're scared." Min squeezed his hand, remembering that quiet Tuesday night that had changed everything. You already have his most important quality, she said, a beautiful heart. That night, as Los Angeles twinkled beneath a blanket of stars, Min sang the Chinese lullaby one last time before the surgery. Her voice carried all the love, fear, and hope that filled their small apartment. Tomorrow would bring changes, but tonight, in this moment, she held her son close and believed in miracles born from kindness and songs sung in the dark. The morning of the surgery arrived with gentle dawn light filtering through hospital windows. David held his soccer ball until the very last moment, only letting go when the nurses came to take him to pre-op. His brave smile wobbled just a little as he handed it to Min. "Keep it safe, Mom," he whispered. "I'll need it for practice soon." The waiting room felt both vast and suffocating. Min sat alone, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles turned white. 6 hours. The doctors had said the procedure would take 6 hours. She had already counted the ceiling tiles twice, read every outdated magazine, and memorized the pattern on the carpet. "Mind if I sit here?" Min looked up to find Keanu standing there, holding 2 cups of steaming tea. He wore simple jeans and a black hoodie, no disguise this time. His presence was unexpected, but somehow felt right, like the universe confirming that miracles weren't done happening yet. "I hope green tea is okay," he said, settling into the chair beside her. "The cafe owner, Joe, mentioned it's your favorite. He sends his wishes, by the way. Said the morning customers all signed a card." He pulled out an envelope covered in familiar handwriting. Min's hands shook as she opened it. Messages of hope filled the paper, from Mr. Kim, Mrs. Rodriguez, even the morning rush regulars she barely had time to chat with. At the bottom, Joe had written, "Your evening song will be waiting when you're ready to return." "Sometimes," Keanu said softly, "we don't realize how many lives we touch just by being ourselves. Your songs did more than raise money, Min. They reminded people that hope is worth fighting for." The clock ticked steadily onward. Hour 1 passed, then 2. Min found herself humming the lullaby under her breath, a habit born from years of hospital visits. To her surprise, Keanu stayed, his quiet presence anchoring her to reality when anxiety threatened to sweep her away. During hour 3, he shared stories about his sister's battle with leukemia, about nights spent in waiting rooms just like this one. "It changes you," he said, staring into his 4th cup of tea. "Watching someone you love fight makes you realize what really matters." A nurse came with updates every hour. Everything was going according to plan. Dr. Chen and Dr. Tanaka worked in perfect sync, their years of experience guiding each careful movement. Still, Min's heart jumped every time footsteps approached the waiting room door. "Tell me about the first song you ever sang to David," Keanu asked during hour 4, when Min's anxiety was reaching its peak. She found herself talking about lullabies sung in hospital rooms, about tiny fingers gripping her hand, about hope wrapped in melody. 5 hours in, Mrs. Wu brought them fresh tea and sandwiches that Min couldn't eat. Her whole world had narrowed to the surgery behind those distant doors, to the steady rhythm of breathing and waiting. "He's going to need physical therapy after this," Keanu mentioned casually. "I know someone who works with kids recovering from heart surgery. She helps them build strength gradually, safely. When David's ready, she'd be happy to help." Min turned to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. This man, this stranger who'd become something else entirely, had thought about David's future when she'd been too scared to look beyond today. Finally, after 6 hours that felt like 6 years, Dr. Chen appeared in his surgical scrubs, tired but smiling. "The surgery was successful," he announced. "David's heart is already showing improved function. He's in recovery now." Min's legs gave way, but Keanu caught her elbow, steadying her. Happy tears flowed freely as Dr. Chen explained the details, how perfectly the procedure had gone, how strong David's heart was, how optimistic they were about his recovery. "When can I see him?" Min asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Soon," Dr. Chen promised. "He's asking for his soccer ball already." Keanu squeezed her shoulder gently. "I should go," he said, standing. "David needs his mom now, not an audience." "But Min?" He paused, his eyes sincere. "Keep singing. The world needs voices that remind us of goodness." As Min waited to see her son, she hummed the lullaby one more time. But now it wasn't a prayer or a plea, it was a song of gratitude, of miracles born in cafe corners, of kindness that changed lives. 3 months passed like pages turning in a storybook. The hospital rooms and beeping machines became distant memories as David grew stronger each day. His physical therapy sessions with Ms. Yuki, the specialist Keanu had recommended, turned from careful exercises to playful training games. Ready for something exciting? Ms. Yuki asked one sunny afternoon, pulling out a real soccer ball. David's eyes lit up like fireworks on a summer night. They started simple, gentle kicks while sitting down, then standing passes, each movement carefully monitored but filled with joy. Min watched from the sidelines, her heart dancing with every smile, every successful kick. The surgical scar on David's chest was healing nicely, now a thin line that he proudly called his superhero mark. Dr. Chen had explained that it would fade with time, but David hoped it wouldn't disappear completely. "It's my reminder to be brave," he told his mom. The youth soccer league tryouts were approaching, and though David was still building his strength, Ms. Yuki had helped arrange for him to attend as a special guest. The LA Galaxy had heard his story through Keanu's connections, and their youth development team had something special planned. The morning of the tryouts arrived with perfect soccer weather, cool breeze, warm sun, and clouds that looked like they were cheering from above. David wore his Galaxy uniform, the one that had waited patiently in his closet for this moment. "Remember what we practiced," Ms. Yuki said, helping him warm up. No pressure, just joy. The field was filled with kids running drills, but everyone paused when the youth team coach called for attention. "Today," he announced, "we have a special player joining us. His journey to this field has been longer than most, but his heart," he winked at David, "is stronger than ever." They'd planned a simple demonstration. David would attempt his first real shot on goal since the surgery. The team's goalkeeper, a kind-faced boy named Tommy, gave him an encouraging nod. Parents and players gathered to watch, creating a circle of support. David took a deep breath, placed his ball, and looked at the goal. 3 steps back, just like Ms. Yuki had taught him. The world seemed to hold its breath. Min found herself humming the lullaby under her breath, a habit now filled with gratitude instead of worry. The kick was perfect. The ball soared through the air in a beautiful arc, past Tommy's outstretched hands, and into the net. The crowd erupted in cheers. David stood frozen for a moment, then broke into the biggest smile Min had ever seen. Ms. Yuki was crying happy tears, and even the tough-looking coach was wiping his eyes. That evening, Min returned to Joe's cafe for her regular performance. The tip jar was still there, but now it had a new sign, "For future soccer stars' dreams." The usual customers welcomed her back with warm hugs and excited questions about David. As she stepped onto the familiar small stage, Min noticed a fresh envelope propped against the microphone stand. Inside was a photo. David's goal-scoring moment captured perfectly, with a simple message in now familiar handwriting. "Every great comeback story needs its own soundtrack. Keep singing. Keanu." Her first song that night wasn't "Somewhere Over the Rainbow." Instead, she sang the Chinese lullaby, but with new verses she'd written herself. Verses about soccer balls and brave hearts, about kindness from strangers and dreams coming true. The cafe fell silent, just like that Tuesday night that felt so long ago. In the back corner, a figure in a baseball cap smiled softly before slipping away into the night. But this time, Min wasn't singing for help or hope. She was singing in gratitude and joy, in celebration of miracles both big and small. Later that night, as she tucked David into bed, his precious soccer ball close by, he asked sleepily, "Mom, do you think Mr. Reeves knows how many people he helped?" Min thought about the ripples of kindness, how one person listening to a desperate song had created waves of hope that touched so many lives. "I think," she answered softly, "he knows that helping one person can change the whole world." "Good," David mumbled, drifting off to sleep. "Because someday I'm going to help someone too, just like he helped us." Outside, the Los Angeles stars twinkled like scattered dreams, while somewhere in the city, a quiet hero smiled, knowing that sometimes the most beautiful songs are the ones we sing after the storm has passed.